Hi everyone, welcome to the Coding Rooms weekly podcast. I'm Sasha, creator of Coding Rooms, and I'm joined today by Barry Lindler and Joe Mazzone, both amazing computer science teachers who use Coding Rooms and are now on V2. And the topic for the discussion today is the migration of on the Coding Rooms from IDE v1 to IDE v2, which is of course the latest version. It's now the new default for everything that we do on Coding Rooms. And so I'll get things started by letting Barry introduce himself. Barry?
All right. My name is Barry Lindler. I teach computer science at Dutch Fork High School in Irmo, South Carolina. I've been teaching 20 plus years. Some of them have been good years. But I teach AP Computer Science, AP Computer Science Principles, AN Principles, and Computer Programming 1 and 2. And our school has a pathway to computer science that incorporates all 4 years. So I'm very fortunate to have the students with me for those 4 years. We are currently on all face-to-face with the option to go virtual in case of anything happening again with the pandemic or in bad weather such as that. But normally we're face-to-face now.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks, Barry. Joe?
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Mazzone, and I teach at Davies Career and Technical High School in Rhode Island. And similar to Barry, I teach a sequence of courses and happen to also include AP Computer Science Principles and APA. But my students have a focus in engineering in general. And so I teach the computer science coursework of that focus and for those students. We are in a hybrid situation, so 50% of my students come in school on one day and the other 50% come on the next day. So at this point in the pandemic, that's what we're doing. Similar though, more snowstorms up here than maybe what Barry's facing, but bad weather, we're out, and anything with the pandemic, spikes in positive cases, stuff like that. So we've been doing hybrid, online, in person, all the mix.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So why don't we get started talking about V2? Barry, since you started, I'll let Joe pick this one up first. What have you liked the most in the V2 IDE so far?
So I really, really like V2. I think first and foremost, it'd be the familiarity or how familiar it feels compared to other probably developing environments, IDEs used by not even just teachers, just most individuals that have programming experience. So I think people will feel more comfortable with it. So the one thing I'll say, I won't steal them all, so I'll switch off with Barry so he can say some things, we can go back and forth. But I would say first and foremost of that familiarity is the new file tree and file management setup in V2. It allows for so many different things that you can do now, and so much easier for your students to kind of navigate different file or multi-file projects and things like that. I don't know if Barry, you want to piggyback off that and name something else you like.
Absolutely, and along with that file tree, just the folder structure just gives them that, like Joe said, that familiarity with how they're used to in other desktop environments. I really like the graphics support and how snappy that seems to be. The fact that they can put graphics into their program and see them as separate tabs and interact with them very fast. And that leads me to the next thing is the response time. It's very snappy. The students have commented multiple times of how it's hard for them to kind of believe that it's really a virtual machine. Now they sense it sometimes, but most of the time it's just very responsive. And that's something we really like about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's one of the great things about Coding Rooms. My students are on these Chromebooks that typically behave slow and they don't like them, yet the Coding Rooms experience is really great, and that's why they can't believe some of the projects that they run on Coding Rooms on their sluggish Chromebook, but it works really pretty well. So I really like that. I really like, so piggybacking off of what Barry said, that little, the desktop view in V2, you can open up a little pane to see the desktop for any graphics projects. So you can get a quick little preview with it if you're just doing a couple modifications. So I've seen students already using that. They click run, you can see the desktop, so you can check out your GUI or your graphic, click, make the quick change, color change, something like that, click run again, and it's all right within that your workspace area, and you don't have to go to another tab or anything like that. But then still, if you do want to experience your game, let's say they're making a game, they can open it in the desktop in a new tab and get that nice big screen to interact with it. So having both available is awesome.
Sure. And when you open that desktop too, being able to share that link with other students. And so they're now their game or their application, another one's using from a different Chromebook. And they really like the what we call the rewind or rollback feature. So they kind of replay those projects and we can see keystroke by keystroke. They really like that.
Yeah, that's really great for looking through students' thought process, finding some mistakes also. I mean, there's so many great benefits to that. And yeah, sharing seeing more with students interacting. We have forking now on projects, so that's really cool. Addition recently to coding rooms. So some really great interactions. I'll say one of the other things that I've listed for V2 that I really like is the custom run configurations have allowed a lot more capabilities, and it's really, really powerful because this is just a virtual machine running. So we have all the capabilities at your fingertips to do lots of things. So I have, for instance, a working example of a project for students to use MicroPython to get a hex for the microbit right inside of coding rooms. Why am I able to do that? Well, I have all the commands at my fingertips to do that. I can set up a nice custom run configuration. My students just click that run button and it creates that for them and they can download it to their microbit. So we have lots of really cool capabilities because of how powerful the platform it really is.
It's awesome to hear those
the other thing
use cases.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And when Joe mentioned that, it reminded me of what my students were doing the other day. They do a lot of collaborative programming in the classroom. And one of my students was at the desktop doing his thing. And they were making notes for the next class time, things they wanted to do. And instead of putting normal comment markers, they just highlighted some code, right-clicked, added a comment right in the code because it's kind of Google Doc-ish in that comment feature. It surprised me that that's how they wanted to use it, but it was a very efficient way to do it. So, and then next time they come in the code, it's kind of pre-highlighted. They remember exactly where they were, some little notes they wanted to do. It was really neat.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. I haven't heard about that use case before either. Yeah. Cool. So we didn't start with V2, right? So it's a fairly new thing. I'm really interested to know, you can start with you, Barry, how the transition was for you as an instructor and being in that sort of hybrid system as well.
The transition from V1 to V2 or from just using V2 in particular?
From V1 to V2.
The transition for me was relatively easy because we were just getting into coding rooms with one of my classes with V1. And so as we were moving into the beta of V2, I just took all of my classes directly with me. So we didn't have anything, old habits to unlearn or things like that. But my older students that went from V1 to V2, I mean, the reaction was instant. I mean, like, number one, it looked better. It felt better. And like Joe said, it just felt more familiar. They had gotten comfortable with V1, but everything just felt so much better and easier with V2. I mean, it took a minute, maybe 2 minutes, and everything was fine. It's very intuitive. They're easy to find things that they're looking for. So we didn't have any issues whatsoever transitioning over, and everything ran just fine.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. For me as a teacher and managing it, I thought it went incredibly well. Really, like, didn't even feel like a transition. It just worked. What I thought was interesting when I talk about the transition for my students is they really loved the new design. They thought it was great, but when I'm kind of just showing them, even when you have students that are familiar with programming and you're using a new IDE, you got to show them some of the tips, tricks, kind of ways to navigate it. With this, it was more about me talking about what you didn't have to do anymore, and less about what you needed to do. So like it was files, creating new files, navigating through the files felt so familiar to them that I didn't really have to explain that. I just said, oh, look, here's where you can look at your files. Boom, they understood it. And like things like no longer having to turn on or start up the interactive terminal and just having the console and shell set up the way it is now in V2. it was more about me saying, you don't have to do this anymore. It just works. Click the run button. Everything's set up. You have interactive user input and everything just work. And so it seems more streamlined. It's easier for students to onboard onto V2, I would say. And I would say any teachers that are kind of hesitant to, switch over to V2, I suggest to just try it. I think that your students in your class will enjoy it.
Sure, we didn't see anything that did not work, or that anything that made the students kind of go, why is it that way? Everything just felt really good about it.
I see.
I agree.
And one thing to note, so you guys had your assignments in V1, right? Previously as
Yes.
well.
Correct.
So were there any issues when you had those assignments, we upgraded to V2, as far as being able to continue to use the same assignments?
No, not at all. So everything seems to be very smooth. I had a student that was because of whatever COVID pandemic's going on, was behind on some assignments. So whenever a new student opens an assignment new, once you transition, it's going to convert it to a V2 workspace. So all new workspaces, once that's turned on, are going to be version 2. So I have a student that most of the class completed it with version 1, completed it on the expected due date. I had a student going back, completed this assignment, and it was in version 2, and everything seemed to work well with me being able to open the workspace, check everything out. So I've had some of those different situations where it's kind of in that mixed world, and it's worked great.
Awesome.
And I would say the same thing. It's almost like it just, just like it didn't happen, that there was no issue whatsoever. And I know it sounds like we're just glossing everything over, but it really was that smooth. I was anticipating some issues, especially a few days, like Joe had said, when we had some students coming back in from quarantine. And many of my students are in our virtual program. And so for whatever reason they get behind, I thought that was going to be an issue, but it wasn't. And after the first day, we just didn't even think about it. Everything, they just opened up and it worked.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I really have to give the Coding Rooms engineering team a lot of credit there for making sure that everything was very smooth with the way it went. So big clap to Sasha and the team.
Yeah, that's a very nerve-wracking moment for a teacher. Anytime something is different, when you come in that day and you've got a lot of things lined up, all these pieces have to be just in the right order, and something's changed. You're just on pins and needles, that there's something that's going to be broken, that's not going to work, and that just didn't happen. Everything was fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So us teachers, we appreciate when you take the care to make sure things are going to work well.
Yeah, we were, that's part of why we made it a sort of rolling migration, that you can always, still to this day, you can technically use V1 for new classrooms as well. You can just click that toggle to disable V2 and use the old version if you need to. And so we want to make sure that everyone is really comfortable with the migration and that everything is fully backwards compatible. So there's a lot of sort of investment to make sure that like all the file formats and everything should work exactly the same as you move into V2.
Excellent.
Were there any things about the transition for students? Like any gotchas or anything that came up with them, or any different new usage patterns?
No, so I think it has worked so much smoother for the students. Some of the small hiccups I would get once in a while with a student getting stuck on something, they couldn't run a specific file, things like that. I don't seem to be having those issues with version 2, where there's weird hangups, where I mentioned the interactive terminal before, they forget to do that and they're click and run and just looking at something to log, and it's because they have some kind of user input they're trying to get, and they forget I have to go over there and turn that on, or be able to just even navigate the files with a larger project that has maybe 5, 6 files, a lot easier in version 2 versus version 1. It was harder to kind of adjust the tabs at the top. So I'm seeing that it's just been a fantastic transition for the students. It really doesn't feel like a transition. It just feels like an improvement. And that's how it should be when you go on to the next version of something. It should be better. So.
Absolutely. It wasn't a different learning curve. It was just improved. And like Joe had mentioned, just the terminal, when it needs to, when it times out and things like that, it's now just so much more intuitive. I believe there's like a resume button or something at the bottom. You just know what to do. I just feel like I've had to spend so much less time with the students and the interface, and we could spend our time programming and on theory, which is how it should be. That tool should be transparent in the background, and that's what it's becoming.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and that's exactly how I'd explain it. Is I deal with zero since V2, really tool issues, where they're having an issue using the Coding Rooms IDE. It's now just programming, content, theory, that we're handling, and I'm sitting down having conversations with students, and that's what it's all about.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. So I wanted to speak a little bit to some of the items that we have on the V2 roadmap. So recently we added support for Jupyter Notebooks. So you can use Jupyter Notebooks inside of Coding Rooms. And following with that trend, what we'll be adding is the ability to swap between using the Coding Rooms IDE and using Visual Studio Code or VS Code in the V2 IDE. So you'll actually be able to have, like the lightweight Coding Rooms IDE, or be able to switch to VS Code. And with VS Code, you'll also be able to use extensions and stuff. And then the code will sync between the two IDEs. So we're really excited about that. That's coming out soon. And some of the other things in terms of workspaces, being able to add collaborators to a workspace. Recently, forking shipped. And so we're planning to update the entire interface for adding collaborators and stuff to your Coding Rooms workspaces in the near future as well. So those are some of the biggest changes that will be happening with V2, and those will all be fairly quiet. Those you can kind of, they shouldn't come with major changes. You'll just have sort of new features that you can enable and run as you like there. So it shouldn't impact the existing experience at all.
It's really exciting to hear. I've been tempted to play around with Jupyter Notebooks, and now that it'll feel the same, I think it'd be easier for us to explore. And I've been hearing Joe talk so many times about how much he enjoys VS Code. I'm excited about that opportunity. As he mentioned earlier, a lot of our students in my particular case are on Chromebooks. Many of them have their own MacBooks and things like that, but several on Chromebooks, several will be virtual this year and all next year. And so I didn't want to use anything that they could not use at home. And so by you integrating that with VS Code, that allows me to do things in the classroom that I know everyone's going to have that equity piece. So that's huge for us. And I'm really excited about what that brings, the opportunities for us to grow and do some things to continue to integrate the desktop and then that remote environment. It's really cool. Thank you for doing that.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. And Joe, I know you're particularly excited about VS Code, or I'd be interested to know what are some of the key features that you're looking forward to seeing in the VS Code implementation?
So prior to using Coding Rooms and prior to COVID, when I was just using my computer lab, that's where we were using that as an IDE, VS Code. And my students were familiar with it. I use that for my own personal development most of the time. And it's just a really powerful IDE, and to have access to it in the web browser on a Chromebook, it's awesome. It has things I'm excited about. Of course, some of the extensions, there are really powerful extensions that are really cool to be able to use. But now we can have a debugger. We have nice intelligent code completion, and just a lot of really nice, powerful features that come with that level of a professional IDE. So it's just awesome to have that in the web browser, in Coding Rooms, where I'm going to be able to create assignments in Coding Rooms, all those things, but students can still have the ability to use an IDE like that.
That's awesome. As a few closing thoughts, Barry, Joe, do you all have any tips for teachers who will be starting with V2, or any other things you'd like to add to the conversation?
One of them for me is when we were looking around when the pandemic hit, just like everybody else, we were scrambling, grabbing stuff, just trying anything and everything. And that got us over a little fear factor. And then when the fall came, and then we realized the situation we're going to be in, we're still looking for that solution. I just wasn't really happy until I read some posts that Joe had made on Facebook, and made me look in coding rooms. But for me personally, just do it. You know, there's never going to be a perfect time. And don't over plan that first lesson. Know there's going to be some hiccups. Just do it and observe and get some feedback from your students. And just know that first day or two is going to be bumpy as you figure out what works for you. But don't be afraid of it. Of all the things that I tried, this now, especially V2, is the most student friendly and the most consistently transparent technology that we have found in this environment. So just have confidence it's going to work, but also know there's going to be a hiccup or two and you'll get it figured out. But there's no reason to wait. Tomorrow's a good day to start it.
Awesome.
I absolutely agree with Barry. And so Barry and I started to become friendly in some of these, workshops around using some of these things. So I started the school year off using GitHub Classroom, and I transitioned to a couple different things throughout the school year, in a crazy kind of school year too. Mm-hmm. Not saying that's for everyone to do, but it was worth it in the end. Now I'm very happy. My students are very happy with how we're using coding rooms. So it's worth those risks sometimes to find the platform, to find the tool that's going to work best in your classroom. So try it out. If you're using coding rooms, you want to try out V2, take that risk, test it out on your own ahead of time, and start using it. Really cool things. I'd recommend try a nice GUI or graphics, you know what I mean, fun project for a day. Yep. It's really cool to run on coding rooms.
Yeah, just give them something to play with. And I'd forgotten, like Joe's right, that, and thinking back, we went through 4 different scenarios, this being the 4th. And so my students never knew when we came in, might be like, oh, this is not going to work. We're going to try something else. And they were very flexible, much more forgiving than I was internally. But just very happy that came across some comments from Joe and got into coding rooms. I really appreciate what y'all do for education. Can feel that there's always some thought process of how that's going to impact that teacher, and that makes a big difference.
And yeah, that's the big difference between coding rooms and a lot of the other products is it really is dedicated to improving the lives of teachers and students, you know what I mean, in the classroom with the product. There are other products that focus on just being a developing environment for anyone. That's great. There are other products that have education tools, but I never feel like they're really for making everything work for the teacher and the students. Coding rooms, I feel that way. When I talk to the team in the 24/7 chat, I email Sasha, I feel like they really care about the workflow and everything working well for students and teachers. And that's amazing. So thank you, Sasha.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys. Yeah, that's our thought process whenever we work on new features or think about things to fix. That's kind of why I think you're seeing that experience with coding rooms, and we appreciate that it's kind of coming around the full cycle from teachers to students and back to us. So do y'all have any other closing thoughts that you'd like to add? I think we covered everything. Yeah,
I covered it all.
Makes sense.
Awesome.
Try version 2. You'll love it.
Absolutely. Try it.
Thank you guys. So with that, we'll close out this week's podcast. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you, and see you later. Bye.
Thank you.